Yesterday, the Supreme Court of the United States made a decision that affects millions of American gun owners. All 9 justices agreed. Every single one. Liberal, conservative, didn't matter, 9-0. And here's the shocking part. The Trump administration was on the losing side. The government argued that a man should lose his gun rights forever, not because he committed a violent crime, not because he threatened anyone, not because he was dangerous, because he smoked marijuana a few times a week. The Supreme Court said no, unanimously. This ruling changes how the federal government can take away your gun rights, and if you own a firearm in this country, you need to understand exactly what happened and what it means for you. To understand this ruling, you need to go back to 1968. That year, Congress passed the Gun Control Act. It was a sweeping piece of legislation that set the rules for who can and cannot own a firearm in the United States. Most of it you already know. Felons can't own guns. Domestic abusers can't own guns. People who have been committed to a mental institution can't own guns. But buried inside that law was one specific provision that most Americans have never heard of. It said that any person who is, and these are the exact words, an unlawful user of or addicted to any controlled substance cannot legally possess a firearm. Simple enough on the surface. If you're a drug addict, you can't have a gun. Most people would probably agree with that. But here's where it gets complicated. That word user is very broad. It doesn't say addict, it says user. And that distinction between someone who uses drugs occasionally and someone who is genuinely addicted is at the heart of everything that happened yesterday. Meet Ali Hemani. He's an American citizen from the Dallas area. He's got a job. He lives with his parents. By every account, he's a law-abiding person. In 2022, the FBI showed up at his house. They were investigating his family for alleged terrorism-related activities. Here's what they found: a handgun, legally owned, and some marijuana. Hemani cooperated with agents completely. He handed over his gun, he pointed out the marijuana himself, and in an interview he told agents openly that he used marijuana about every other day. The terrorism investigation went nowhere. No charges, no evidence, nothing. But 6 months later, federal prosecutors charged Hemani with a felony. Not for terrorism, not for violence, not for any crime involving his gun. They charged him solely because he had admitted to using marijuana while owning a firearm. Under that 1968 law, that was enough for up to 15 years in prison and a permanent lifetime ban on ever owning a gun again. Hemani fought back. He said the law violated his Second Amendment rights. And one by one, the courts agreed with him, all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. Yesterday morning, the Supreme Court issued its ruling, 9-0 in favor of Hemani. Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote the opinion, and he made the core argument simple. The government cannot automatically strip a person of their Second Amendment rights just because they occasionally use marijuana. The key word there is automatically. This ruling doesn't say drug users can always have guns. It says the government has to actually prove that a specific person is dangerous before taking their rights away. They can't just say, you smoke weed sometimes, therefore you lose your gun forever. Gorsuch wrote that giving the government broad power to label any group as dangerous and disarm them would risk swallowing the Second Amendment whole. And every justice on the court agreed with that reasoning. Now here's something important to understand, and this is where a lot of news coverage gets it wrong. The court did not strike down the 1968 law entirely. It is still illegal for genuine addicts to own firearms. It is still illegal for people who are impaired by drugs to have a gun. What the court said is that casual, occasional use is not enough on its own to take away someone's gun rights permanently. The government has to do more than point at a person and say they use drugs. They have to prove that person is actually dangerous. The Hunter Biden connection. You've probably heard this law before, even if you didn't know its technical name. In 2024, Hunter Biden was convicted under this exact same statute. Federal prosecutors charged him with lying on a gun purchase form when he bought a Colt Cobra revolver in 2018. He checked the box saying he was not a drug user, but prosecutors argued he was addicted to crack cocaine at the time. His father, then President Joe Biden, pardoned him before he could be sentenced. Now here's the interesting twist. Yesterday's ruling doesn't directly affect the Hunter Biden case. His situation involved alleged addiction and lying on a federal form, which is a separate issue, but the legal standard the Supreme Court set yesterday will absolutely affect how future cases like his are prosecuted. The government can no longer use the simple fact of drug use as an automatic disqualifier. They have to build an actual case that the person is dangerous. Let's bring this home to what it actually means for everyday gun owners in America. Right now, an estimated 50 million Americans use marijuana. That number includes millions of people who also legally own firearms. Under the old interpretation of the 1968 law, every single one of those people was technically committing a federal felony every time they handled their gun. Yesterday's ruling narrows that drastically. If you are an occasional marijuana user, not an addict, not someone who is impaired when handling your firearm, the government now faces a much higher bar to prosecute you. Does that mean you are completely in the clear? No. Federal law still says drug users cannot possess firearms. Marijuana is still a Schedule I controlled substance at the federal level, even in states where it is legal. The conflict between state marijuana laws and federal gun laws has not been resolved by this ruling. What has changed is the standard the government must meet to prosecute you. They need to show you are dangerous. They can't just point to the marijuana and call it a day. This ruling is part of a much larger shift in how the Supreme Court views the Second Amendment. In 2022, the Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling that said gun laws must be consistent with the historical tradition of firearm regulation in early America. That decision set off a wave of legal challenges to gun laws across the country, including the Maryland Glock ban we covered on this channel, and the Virginia rifle ban that takes effect in less than 2 weeks. Yesterday's ruling follows that same logic. Gorsuch looked at early American history and found no tradition of permanently disarming people simply because they used substances. Therefore, the government can't do it today. And there is another major ruling still coming. Before the end of this month, the Supreme Court is expected to decide on Hawaii's law that bans carrying a concealed weapon in most public places, restaurants, bars, stores, without the property owner's explicit permission. The conservative justices signaled strong skepticism toward that law during oral arguments earlier this year. Another ruling that could expand gun rights further is coming very soon. What happens next? Yesterday's ruling will trigger a wave of legal challenges to existing prosecutions. Lawyers across the country are already looking at cases where people were charged under the same 1968 provision and asking whether those convictions can now be challenged. It will also force Congress to look at the law itself. If the government can no longer use it as a blunt instrument against casual drug users, lawmakers will have to decide whether to rewrite it more narrowly or leave it as it is and let prosecutors figure out the new limits case by case. And it sets up what could be the most consequential period for Second Amendment law in American history. The Supreme Court has now issued major rulings expanding gun rights in 2022, 2024, and again yesterday. Another ruling is coming this month. The legal landscape for gun ownership in this country is changing fast. If you own a firearm, or if you care about the Second Amendment, the next few weeks are ones you need to pay attention to. We will be covering every development on this channel as it happens. If this video helped you understand what actually went down yesterday, drop a comment below and tell me what you think about the ruling. Should casual marijuana users be allowed to own guns? I want to hear where you stand. Hit like if this was useful, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the Hawaii ruling when it drops. That one could be even bigger. See you in the next one.